Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Tim.
I am so excited to have you on this episode. If it wasn't for my lecturers spending the time with me, my dad doing all the mathematics on my last exam, and the coffee meetings that you and I had, I would not have passed the final marketing unit of strategy. I was the classic case of the marketer who would come up with ideas and tactics based on this strategy, but completely ignoring the numbers. Now, the thing that made me different is I actually knew I had to look at the numbers, whereas a lot of people in your class, because I don't think we were in the same class, a lot of people in your class didn't, but that was the first place that you went, which has now led us to both running businesses, and you're one of the best marketers that I know because not only do you have the ideas, but you look into the numbers. And I just wanted to make that as my introduction to you as a marketer who actually looks at the numbers, but not only that, is good at it and then therefore makes good decisions. That's my summary of you in a very sort of 40-second thing. But for people who don't know you, tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, I guess thinking about my background, it has evolved a lot since those days back as uni students. Mm-hmm. But it's ironic because I remember the first year doing statistics and just absolutely hating it. I was like, why am I doing this? And when I was a small child at primary school, I quite enjoyed maths, but by the time I got to high school, I had terrible math teachers. I really switched off, didn't engage. And then when I went to uni, statistics sort of followed down that path and I didn't enjoy it at all. But then by the time I finished my degree, I was like, man, I really shouldn't have done that management major. I should have done stats. And now I love data. I love playing with data. And that's basically because data is raw material that you can transform into useful information. And from there, you can make optimal decisions. And that's pretty much true in any facet of your life.
So something that I find quite funny is the stories that you would tell about that classroom where someone goes, because it's fairly competitive, I think, that last unit.
Yeah, sure.
In a sense, because this is a capstone, mm-hmm. right? So everyone has ideas, right? But whose idea is better? And I remember you saying you would just shut people down by looking at the numbers. Do you remember an example of when someone was like, no, this is right, but then you went, no, but if you looked at that table, you're wrong? I know it's a long time ago, but I just remember I remember laughing with you about it.
It's probably more than 10 years ago now.
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't remember any specific examples, but that does sound like something I would do. The numbers in those cases, you're looking at specific business examples and they're trying to get you to apply critical thinking to the information that you've been given. And the information is often quite imperfect. There'll be gaps and, maybe the data is missing certain key points, or you've got part of the data for one aspect of the problem, but then you're missing it for another. So it's sort of about critical thinking, identifying, there was always an obvious answer to those problems, and that obvious answer was always not quite right. So, it's about peeling back those layers a little bit and really, really logically thinking about the problem and thinking about what you're actually trying to achieve. And, I think that whole unit, it's sort of critical thinking, and then you have to justify your critical thinking with evidence.
And that was the frustrating thing for me was, now we're sitting in the Rialto building. My dad was the lead civil engineer on this building. He had very good mathematics. Yep. It was him. Sadly, that didn't get passed down to me, right? Now, I'm not an idiot, but I'm also smart enough to know that that's not my strength. And what I knew is I knew the data was important, but I couldn't then translate that. It was within the conversations with you that you actually went, hang on, look at this, look at this, look at this. And I remember having really great chats, which is why I'm excited to have you on today about that. But how does that So that was 10 years ago. That was uni. Good sort of intro on how we know each other. But how does that mindset help you today? Not only build websites, not only run campaigns, but how does that help you in your career today?
Well, okay, the way to think about it is maths is a tool to problem solve. And almost anything in business, you're trying to solve a problem in one way or another. So when I used to do a lot more marketing work than I do now, it would be really about trying to collect data, because a lot of people who run businesses will not collect data appropriately. And then once you collect that data, you have to have that sort of sitting there for a while, like building up some information that you can use. And once you have that data, it's about, diving into the real world business problems and looking what the data is telling you, whether, I guess if you think about it in like a scientific method terms, you have your null hypothesis. And it's like, well, maybe this relationship is actually doing nothing, it's meaningless. And then the alternative is that this is actually important and, we need to invest in understanding this more or doing a certain thing.
An easy case that is happening for me right now. In the last 6 years of this business, I have built products and set pricing based on gut feel. I've never, until the last 6 months, never actually looked at tax, numbers, profit. And I've gone for a fucking business degree. Yeah. And I haven't even at the point even done, because sometimes I guess it's internal, but it's like I'd never sat down and went, okay, what's my break-even point? All right, I don't want to just break even. I want a 20% margin or 30% margin. I've just created products based on gut feel. And I bet you if I'm doing it, who else is doing it?
Yeah, so I think as a business owner, and both of my parents have owned their own businesses, so they work in healthcare, but growing up in a family of entrepreneurs to some degree, and having friends like you and myself having my own business, it's really easy to do those sort of calculations, but you didn't get your first principle right, and that's that actually my time is also worth money and I need to live and I need to add that into my profit and loss calculations. I guess that's an example of critical thinking, right? Like it's a very simple example, but so many small business owners will just skip that. And that's why they need like a great accountant to sort of steer them down the path. So obviously I don't really work in that space, but I have plenty of business experience, both, through working in businesses and also having my own. But those things, I guess, sort of coalesce into an interesting skill set where you're sort of taking a few different areas of expertise and bringing them together. And where I'm at now, it's a very, very holistic, systems-based approach to optimizing businesses. And ultimately, as someone who has a business, you want to, do good by your customers. You want to make as much money as possible at the same time. And I've found that a lot of the ways to do that is by harnessing technology, building well thought out systems, and then having those systems collect you data that then feeds back into a loop where you can optimize.
Yeah. So you had a moment a while ago at a conference, which was actually the start of us saying, hey, we should talk about this in a podcast. Even though you're one of the best marketers I know, you said something earlier, you don't do a lot of marketing anymore. Yep. You had a moment at a conference which changed the way that you operate. Can you take me back to that? What was the conference? And then take me back to what happened, which has now dictated what you're doing today.
Yeah, so I used to run a digital marketing agency basically. And as part of that, you're spending money on ads. And this was quite a while ago now. It was back in the day where you would manually set your price per click bids on Google, for example. So, Google used to run these pretty large functions, and they would invite advertisers who were spending certain amounts of money to come to these functions. And for them, it was, a mix of sales, a mix of education, a bit of networking and whatever. But I remember sitting in one of these conference halls with like hundreds of people in there, and the presenter started talking about the Google project DeepMind, and that's an AI project basically. And they were talking about how they were using AI to play games and train AI with no information whatsoever. The AI would basically observe games being played, and then it would have to learn how to play the game. And I think in the whole conference hall, 2 or 3 people, including myself, had heard of this. And, from there, the line of discussion went very firmly down to, we're integrating all these new AI tech systems into our ads platforms, which means that the days of you manually choosing how much to spend on a click are gone. And it was really interesting to see how so many people in that room were about to lose a core function of their job. Why would you sit there and manually click on, I'm going to pay $5 a click for this client, I'm going to pay $4 a click for that one. And then also on top of that, you're manually having to write all the copy and stuff like that. So I could see that, marketing was having a moment where technology was about to overthrow a lot of the day-to-day functions of the average marketer. So the writing was on the wall. I didn't want to be one of those people who was basically redundant because technology had replaced me. So I took that as a bit of a catalyst to start really educating myself. I taught myself how to code Python. I just consumed AI content, and I went and did further study in AI, and really having that sort of background in business and marketing, and then upskilling into literally creating things with code. That was a really important journey, and now that's put me in a place where, I can basically solve almost any problem.
So instead of sitting still and doing nothing, and then AI takes your job, you went, how can I go learn about it, use it, and then keep my job? Is that basically what you're saying?
Yeah, it's sort of like, which side of the line do you want to be on, right? And I think you always want to be on the side of the line that's advancing. Technology is rapidly changing our world. I think about the time we were born, right? The internet was hardly a thing.
Yeah.
And technology is rapidly changing our world, and from the time I was a small child, I clearly remember when the internet became a thing, and then, you have the adoption of things like mobile phones, and it's kind of amazing now that the computers that sent people into space were the size of whole rooms, and now you have a little thing in your pocket that's more powerful than that. Yeah. And just even in the last couple of years, like the way AI has now become part of day-to-day life is quite interesting, because I was more interested in this space before things like ChatGPT even existed.
You know what happened last night? So over the weekend I did the doll trend. You turn yourself into an action figure.
Yeah.
I did that for my entire family. Made one for my brother, my sister, my mum, my father-in-law, my mother-in-law, my brother-in-law. Did one for all of them. We get on the call on Sunday. My father-in-law is the group MD for a bank in South Africa called First Capital. He has just started using AI because they're very nervous about it in the banking industry, data person.
Yeah.
But he was using GPT like Google. And my mother-in-law was like, he can't get off of this thing. Like it's his new obsession. And I think that happens for a lot of people when they see GPT. And I was telling him, I said, he's just using it to search.
Yeah.
Right? I was like, in July, I'll show you exactly what you can actually do with this thing, And I think that's happening for everyone.
Yeah, it's really interesting the way it's exploded. Although, I think there's some pretty valid criticism of the whole thing. But I remember about 5 years ago, I was working with a travel startup doing consulting work. And the core concept of the travel startup was to try and capture the unique hidden gem local insights that you would never get unless the hotel manager told you something. And they wanted to basically build a tech platform around these nuggets of information. And this was before, you had the large language models like ChatGPT and whatever. And I wrote this program that basically went to TripAdvisor, went to Google Reviews. It harvested all this information from people reviewing things in certain areas. And I built this massive data set of basically people talking about their experience at a restaurant or at a tourist attraction or whatever. And then from that, it was, I used an algorithm to pull out consistent key phrases and words from these thousands of reviews. And I made these little word cloud graphics so you could sort of see what the key themes were about the review and whatever. Yeah. And at the time, there was some AI software that we trialed to basically use these word clouds to then write a summary of this location. Wow. But the AI tool was pretty terrible. But what I had done still was quite useful in the sense that you could give this word cloud to a copywriter and then almost instantly, without having to do a lot of research, they would have a pretty good understanding on how to actually write a sentence or two to summarize the tip. Yeah. Whereas if you think about now, 5 years later, all of that data that I've harvested, you could literally have into ChatGPT in a second and you've got your perfectly crafted tip that's contextually relevant. Yeah. Technology is changing a lot of stuff. It's upending business models.
So what are you doing based on that? You did all your research. You looked at what was happening. Knowing how you research things just 10 years ago, let alone now, right? I'm pretty confident that the decision you've made is a good one. What are you doing now?
Yeah, so I've set up a business where I'm focusing on three main pillars, I suppose. The first one is system design. The second is data and intelligence. And then the third is web. Yep. So those three things come together and you end up with a pretty holistic approach to building modern businesses that will last into the future.
Awesome.
And I think starting from a systems perspective is really important. You really want to leverage technology to reduce the boring work that your staff hate or that they do poorly and you constantly have to fix their mistakes, or even simple things just like your bookkeeping and stuff like that. Trying to integrate all of your systems together in a clever way where you're really minimizing the amount of heavy lifting that you and your staff do. That's a really important thing for the modern business. And then on top of that, you need to collect data that you can use for, good customer experience or marketing or, whatever it may be. And then your web presence, like having your website as a tool instead of like a digital business card. And then on top of that, you might be building like web applications and systems and more complex stuff on the back end as well.
So when a client comes to you, they call you up and they say, this is the business, this is what we're doing, but these are our problems. What problems do you hear from business owners that you then get excited and you're like, all right, I can work with you, right? I know that if you come and do web systems with us, you're going to have a better business. For me, it's when I listen to an expert who's so bloody good at what they do, but when they try to make video for their marketing content, they turn into a bloody robot, right? So for me, that's like, all right, come this way. Or a client of mine actually posted a TikTok today. He said he's burnt out because of making content. He's making content for several platforms. It's taking him so long. I just typed, I said, mate, we need to talk. Called him up, and I'm talking to him next week about actually doing content in the way that I know how to do it. But that's for me. I know if I hear those problems, I get excited. What's that for you?
I guess like there's two answers to that. One is like the typical way it will happen, and one is my preferred way it will happen.
Yeah, both.
So the typical way it will be, people will come to me because they have some sort of web issue. Like they want to make their new website, they want it to look pretty, their website's really slow and terrible, or whatever it might be. Yep. So I find that web is typically the lead that brings people in. I'd say ideally you flip that and you approach it from the systems perspective first, because your website is a tool that is part of your systems. But generally, I find like what is a really great attitude to have as a business owner is being very aware of the things that your team do well and that they do poorly. And if you can really have an honest perspective on that, you know where your weaknesses are in terms of your systems. And then I can come in and, you know, whether that's on a consulting basis, like literally come to the business, observe what's happening, maybe interview the staff or whatever, and, you know, look at the tech stack, like what software tools are you using. And then from that, you might circle around to your web and you go, all right, how can we build some web applications that live in the cloud and take my data from this one platform to this other, and instead of having someone in the middle manually transferring data through spreadsheets and making mistakes, it's all automatic. It happens every day. You never have to think about it ever again.
Yeah, right. I hear the word systems, and it's almost like my brain switches off.
Okay.
Right. And again, it's just identifying strengths. I've built this business as a salesman, not as a business owner. And I was literally told by someone 2 weeks ago to my face, she said, Tim, you're not a business owner, you're a salesman. And she's like, how do you feel about that? I said, no, not too bad, because pick any business who doesn't have a salesman in the business and it fails, right? However, a salesman can only get me so far. I'm now in a place where we've talked off camera about me getting your help with some things. But you bringing up systems, I'm starting to think every weakness in my business right now is due to a lack of proper systems. Everything from accounting to pricing to even how my websites are laid out. Systems starts it, because if you don't have a system that's that you can replicate, that you can teach, that you can train, you don't have a business. You've got well, I'm not going to say a hobby, but you've got a job that you've just created for yourself. So what are some systems that every business owner should start their business with looking at? Well, I know that's how long is a piece of string, but
yeah. So I'll give you an example of what I've done personally with like launching like my new website and stuff like that.
Yep.
So I built in I built my website as a web application. Yep. So it's using Python code, HTML. It lives on the cloud. There's no server, and what that means is it's sort of limitless in terms of what I can make this website do. It's literally limited by your coding ability.
Wow.
And with tools like ChatGPT that actually make your coding ability so much greater, it's awesome.
Yep.
So I built in a whole bunch of core functionality to the website straight off the bat. Like I have forms that people submit, and it will automatically go through a sequence of events instead of having to use like a CRM and a whole bunch of other stuff. Like I've literally just programmed it all. And it will save all that data into a database. It will notify me. It will then set up some sort of journey for the customer to do whatever, depending on what the form was. I've got the ability to log in and, create projects, like when I'm quoting like a big project. And then what that does is once I create the project, it will notify the customer. It will generate this dynamic web page that loads the project details. It has like a signature thing built in. They sign it. It saves a PDF, loads it into the cloud, emails a copy to them. You know, all of this stuff is automatic.
For example, I had a meeting with a client this morning where it was a post-meeting after delivery of files, right? Almost all of my clients, when I deliver them videos, every one of them has the same question. How often should I post? What should I write with the post? When are my next videos coming in? Right?
Yep.
Now, I had a half an hour to 45-minute meeting with this guy, telling him all about the strategy to post on social media. As I'm listening to you, I'm going, that's just a simple fucking Loom video that I make. That's just standard procedure when I deliver files.
Yep.
And that, like, I'm so in the business that I didn't even have the time to step away and think about that until just talking about it.
So the way I would solve your problem that you just gave is I would have some sort of recorded video. I would then write a blog, post the video on the blog, publish it on your own website. So then you're getting some sort of SEO benefit of that content. You know, you might get people Googling, how much should I post on social media? And then, you know, you're building up some authority and you might get some new business out of that content. Yeah. It's also useful as a tool for your clients because they're getting information. You're not then having to invest the time for each meeting manually. Yeah. And then, you might have like a sequence of blogs on certain topics that are all relevant to these questions. You might have an FAQ page on the website, and then, you're basically just emailing people links to all this information. You do it once, you do it well, then your system takes care of the rest.
And that's the thing, because the fucked up thing is I actually enjoy that meeting.
Yeah, okay.
And that's the fucked up. I enjoy it. But it's the same meeting over and over again with every new client.
Sure, yeah.
And it's not a good system.
And like, think about it like this. You're the business owner, you're the one making money. If you were an employee on a basic wage and you're having to do the same thing over and over Groundhog Day, you're going to get bored and you're going to get burnt out and you're probably going to start to hate it. And then that's the exact perfect thing where you can optimize into a system. That your employees will be better off because they don't have to do grunt work that they hate. They can spend more time, being creative and using their brain and their personal relationships and whatever. And then, you've got some code ticking over in a server that just goes and sends it off people's emails and organizes all that stuff for you.
And that's just one example. There's 3 others that I'm not even going to go into because I'm too embarrassed to put them on camera. But I will tell you after this. Something that I like about you is you're a marketer who cares about the environment. So it puts you in a really interesting position where you can actually enact some proper change if you do things correctly, rather than just yelling out at a bloody rally with a picket sign that does nothing, right? So how does your marketing skills help you with what you want to do for the environment?
Yeah, so on a personal level, I'm kind of in this weird place where I spend so much time on computers, really interested in the way technology is evolving and, the human impacts that has. But then almost all of my fun in life comes from being outdoors and doing stuff in nature. And for that reason, I spend quite a lot of my time investing in how to help environmental groups and how to protect these places that I really care about and I get so much enjoyment out of. So I'm also a director of a group called Protect Our Winters. And that's an environmental group that focuses on Australia's alpine areas. And, Australia doesn't have a lot of snow. We don't have huge mountains. And the reality is with climate change and all the pollution that goes into the atmosphere, Australia is on track to losing all its snow.
Shit.
And that environment doesn't exist anywhere in the whole world. You have species that have evolved to live in that environment. And ultimately, the actions of humans are slowly degrading that. So I use my background and skills from a tech perspective to offer support to groups like that. I think being able to build tools and systems for organizations to help optimize their operations, especially when you're dealing with volunteers and things like that. They don't have a lot of money, so having really good systems is super beneficial. And then from a web perspective as well, you know, if you're an environmental charity, you need to be able to take donations, you need to be able to sell merch, you need to be able to have good SEO. Your website needs to look slick, like you need to look really cool to build support. So I spend a lot of my spare time, you know, kind of giving back into things like that. Yeah. And it's something that I would, you know, honestly like to do more of. Like having more clients in that space would be amazing.
Yeah. I'd love to help you get there. You recently did a report and some people weren't happy with it. Do you want to discuss that?
Look, it's a tricky one because, you know, a ragtag bunch of volunteers with no money raises $40,000 and gets the most up-to-date scientific report on the problem. Like, you know, how climate change is impacting Australia's alpine areas. And we briefed the industry, being ski resorts and all the businesses and stuff, and we briefed them very early on to ask if they wanted to contribute and be part of the research. Largely that was ignored. And then, you know, a few weeks before the report was going to be released publicly, we, you know, had a meeting with them again and we're like, guys, this is coming out. You should be informed and be prepared for it. And basically, you know, you've got the bosses of ski resorts saying, don't publish this report. It's bad for business.
Wow.
And ultimately, we released that report anyway because it's not about what's good for your business. It's about what's good for everything.
Everyone. Yeah.
And, you know, we had huge press coverage. It was a whole... Like there was like 700 press pieces in a week. It was massive. It was all over TV, radio, online. And because we didn't do what they asked us, the industry got really pissed off and basically started sabotaging the efforts of these volunteers who are doing this just because they love it. And, you know, the good that came out of that, what we did, like that press coverage got a lot of attention from politicians and, you know, we started getting invited to go to Parliament and, you know, we...
What did the report say?
It basically said that on the current trajectory of emissions, by 2050, Australia's ski industry will struggle to exist.
Wow. Why?
So that's only in 25 years, right?
Why?
Because it'll be so hot. Like right now we're on trajectory for 3 to 4 degrees of warming around the world. Australia's mountains are not very high and because of that, they're not very cold. So all it takes, like, you know, you need 0 degrees or colder to snow. And you're already on a knife's edge because the mountains aren't very tall. So it doesn't take a lot of warming to see all that snow fall as rain. So, you know, that's several $1 billion to the Australian economy. It's a key employment driver for all of these areas, like in these regional areas. And from an agricultural perspective, all that snow is the water that flows into the rivers that, you know, feeds our agricultural land. So if we see our winters get too hot, there's going to be huge changes in those systems, in those businesses, in those economies. It's going to be very destructive to those areas. And, you know, all we're doing is asking for the industry to actually be on our side and fight for their own interests. And then, you know, at a political level, you're going to have a lot more bang for buck when you have a whole multi-billion-dollar industry behind you instead of infighting, which will happen.
But, yeah. Okay, so 25 years, if nothing changes, snow turns into rain, no more snow.
No more snow.
What's the solution?
You need to very, very aggressively cut the way that our energy is produced.
Okay.
You know, it's shifting very, very much towards renewables. And like, this is an interesting application of technology, right? You know, the way that renewable technology has evolved is really dramatic to the point that, you know, solar and wind are far, far cheaper than coal, gas, and you have some political parties talking about nuclear, and there's pros and cons to nuclear, but the main con being it literally will take decades and a lot of money to make that useful. We should have done that 50 years ago if we were going to do it.
Have you seen Rory Sutherland, advertising guy, talk about the fact that whoever called nuclear power, put it back 10 years?
No, I didn't say that.
I'll link it to you. It's really funny
okay.
because he says by naming that, everyone's connotation is it's this big scary thing.
Yeah, well, to a degree it is, like you can't have a solar panel melt down and go Chernobyl on you, right? Like, and like the waste that comes out of the reactors is something, that problem has never been solved.
Yeah.
Generally the solution is go bury it somewhere where not many people live.
Yeah.
But yeah, I it's a little bit frustrating to see, us having really great technology, and as a country, we have really high uptake on solar and stuff like that. But when you have the political leaders of the country spewing disinformation and not really acting as quickly as they need to, the election's in a few weeks, like I will definitely vote in a way that is protecting the interests of the things that I really care about.
Yeah, I think I should have you on after the election again, just to talk about this.
Well, yeah, this is obviously not really relevant to
it completely is.
Yeah.
No, and it's relevant to, this podcast by nature is designed to cover many topics, including. So I'll have you back on. So I'm going to publish this before the election. Mm-hmm. This is publicly. Have you back on after the election, because there's no point really saying what will happen. So we go, okay, so this person's been elected. This is what that means for the environment.
Sure.
I'm interested in that if you are.
Yeah. No worries. I'll talk about that.
Alastair, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much for coming on. I've been Tim, you've been Alastair. We've been talking. Thank you for being the expert that shared your blueprint today.
No worries, thanks.
Awesome. We'll have you back on in 2 weeks.
Sounds good.
See you soon.